Hello, everybody. We're very excited to be here with you all this evening and talk to you about the power of intelligence and how technology and AI are creating possibilities for dentistry and patients. My name is Dr. Amrish Khanna. I call myself a data junkie, dental nerd, and entrepreneur. I've co-owned and practiced in the field of dentistry for over 16 years now with a couple practices, and have an interesting journey that's led me to where I'll be talking to you today about my intersection of clinical practice into AI and machine learning, and where we are with one of my companies called OraQ AI. So before I do that, just a quick story to share with you and how it led me to this. Through my journey of practicing, I actually we bought our first practice with my wife and my brother in 2012, and had to wake up one morning to a phone call in 2013 at 5 in the morning saying, "Hey, you gotta leave your condo and rush to the practice," and to find out that we were getting hit by the 100-year flood that hit the city of Calgary in Canada. And I share that story because we watched our practice literally kind of wash away before our eyes and losing such a big investment. But that is really what propelled me on this entrepreneurial journey to understand high value, high impact care in dentistry. And that's kind of how, fast forward years later, we're going to be talking a lot about AI and machine learning and research that I was doing at the University of Alberta, and also with my own education platform. So really excited to be here today, and super humbled to be here with a mentor of mine that I've learned from for many, many years, Dr. Gary DeWood.
Well, as Emery said, we met each other when he was seeking out some education stuff, and I think you can see from what's written under me is I've been teaching for the last half of my career while I'm still practicing. I've been at the Pankey Institute. I was clinical director there, and then the Seattle Institute, which is Frank Spear's education company, which we turned into Spear Education. And I am now back actually in private practice, and Amrish asked me if I had any thoughts about this. One of my favorite things is understanding diagnosis and treatment planning. And it's for this reason. When we as dentists see people, we can only treat the things that we see. And so I'm very excited to be here and be part of this.
Thank you. So that we give you a little snippet of what we're going to be talking about today. Going to go into objectives and things that you're going to be able to have for takeaways. So what we're going to be starting with is about technology and AI, and what are the challenges that we're seeing today? Where is AI and machine learning in dentistry today? And how can it be really used to enhance our clinical workflows and patient experience? So what we want you to walk away with is, how can we actually begin to think like an AI dentist today? So whether or not you have a solution or technology you're using today, I really hope that you're going to get some little tidbits on how you can think differently about it. Secondly, we're going to drive into precision care. So how do we do this today? How are we taking a total health approach on our patients, seeing our patients differently? And what does a tech-enabled and AI-enabled approach to new patient and recall exams look like? And lastly, we're going to talk about value to your business. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that this is giving you value, helping you grow your case acceptance with your patients, and ultimately grow the experience that patients are receiving to grow your practice in a way never possible before. Talking about diagnostic proficiency, regardless of training. As some of you who might be listening today are part of group practices or DSOs, and you've got dentists of all various training, years of experience, areas of interest that they do continuing education with, and all these different things. So how do we bring all that knowledge together to be able to uncover all opportunities for care and use a data-driven approach to actually drive focused education? So it all starts with this problem that we're seeing, and I'm going to pass it over to Gary here.
So the problem that exists in practice, and actually it exists from the first time we do anything, is that, there we go. We have so many things to think about on an ongoing basis. I don't know about you, but one of the things I've always enjoyed, really, really enjoyed, was when I took time with one of my colleagues. I'm fortunate I practiced with my wife, to be able to sit down and look at the data that we gathered and think about that data. And the difficulty in doing that was that I always felt like, do I have time to really, really sit down with this stuff? I don't know about you, but there were some of those mornings where I came in and I said, oh my goodness, I have a treatment consult today at 10. It's now 8:05. I better pull all that stuff together. And the reason for that is just that there's so many things going on that we have to deal with. Because even if you don't own that practice, you have your own practice inside it, because dentistry is is done one-to-one. So you have a business that you're running. That's what systems are all about. You got to find a way to pay the people around you. See, it's not just you getting paid. All these things are on our mind because somehow we have to make a living out of doing this. When I got out of school, I really thought my main job was just do this, find stuff and fix it. I learned that part of what I have to do is absolutely that. And you got to get really good at that. And in fact, I think one of the hardest things to do is if you spend a lot of time and you're really good about talking to people, you got to be able to deliver that thing. And that is exactly what Esme was talking about, which is why we have to keep on learning. But we can have help in that. All of these things in this dental ecosystem that we have to pay attention to, what can happen is my focus on being able to invest the time to really sit and see what was there and what is possible often got kind of crimped down because I felt like I had to be busy. And so any tool that I could find to help me think about possibilities, in my mind, is an incredibly powerful tool. It's going to change things for me. See, if I could see the possibilities for patients, that's step one. And that means really being able to pull all of the data together and have the ability to think about what could be different. Because step one is the step that ensures success, both in your dental business and in providing the best dentistry for people. And the fun thing for me in working with dentists is that I have yet to work with a dentist whose primary objective was not what you see right now on your screen. It's exceptional patient care. I mean, that's why we're in this. It's why we do this. It's because of what we can do things. And AuraQ is just a great tool that can pull all the challenges kind of together by giving you that time. Now, it does mean that I have to gather all the information, and that's the most powerful part of doing this. But it allows me now to focus on that. And I can talk about what the patient needs to have done based on what they want. It's a great tool.
So, some of you might be using AI in your practices already today in various different forms. And some of you are just learning about it. And, what are these terms? We hear about AI, we hear about machine learning, workflow automation. What do all these things mean? And really, I mean, AI, it's the field in science, of computer science, essentially, that's taking robust data sets and enabling the problem-solving, decision-making capabilities of the human mind. So how do we train a machine essentially to do that? And that's where machine learning comes in. And it's a method of data analysis that helps to automate this analytic model of processing data, helping us look at patterns within that data and come up with decisions quicker, faster, more efficiently in a way that we as humans can't do. And when it comes to workflow automation, the key about workflow automation is how do we use software and tasks that can actually now automate certain tasks and require less human input, ultimately make us be faster, do what we do easier and more consistent. And I think that's the key here about consistency, is because correlating that data is what is the key to helping us with the outcome, seeing the possibilities, just as Gary just mentioned here, because we have to start with looking at the data, but we got to do something with it. And I think that's where we're really focused on how do we bring this type of technology at our fingertips today so that we can now predict outcomes based on that data and do something bigger and better for our patients. So, going back to some fun examples here about like where do we see or where have we seen, I guess, a data-driven approach in real life even. And many of you have probably seen this movie called Moneyball. And, the story of where, Billy Beane and Peter Brand take a data-driven approach to building out the Oakland A's team. And they're doing that through data analytics rather than traditional methods of coaches and scouts, right? Like they looked at, what is that desired outcome again that we're looking for here? What's the right data set that can help us predict the right outcome and gain all these insights into how their team could have a competitive advantage? So how do we do this in dentistry too, right? Like how could we bring this type of approach to the outcomes that we're looking for as dentists in our day-to-day with our patients and use that as a competitive advantage to really deliver that patient experience in an exceptional way so that we keep getting more and more patients coming in the door wanting us to treat them. So under Oakland A's, under Billy Beane's management of Oakland A's, his ultimate commitment was to this evidence-based approach of being prepared, and rather than just, he wanted to question conventional wisdom of gut instinct. He was saying, hey, we got to go beyond just our gut. And, how can we, again, look at that in dentistry? Because we know when we look at a patient, we know sometimes when something's off or something's wrong, but sometimes it's piecing it all together that's the hardest part. Tennis is another example, also a very technical sport. I share this one because it's similar to the technicalities that are there, a lot of precise data and things that we look at as we do in dentistry. And Novak Djokovic, his coach, actually started evaluating data from his games and took that back to his training and said, hey, he was looking at patterns that, the human mind would never see between, how he would win games based upon different layers of data. Like, did it come from how he served a certain shot? Then what was the second shot? What did it look like? And so on. So this is being used in sports and things everywhere. And, as we, again, apply this to dentistry, it's about those layers of data again. We're looking at so many different things. And then amongst looking at so many different things, we have a multitude of distractions, as Gary mentioned when he was talking about challenges here, where we're trying to manage our day, but we got to run a business. We have to put food on the table. We have our team to be able to take care of. And sometimes teams are gone or adding additional stress in terms of somebody being sick today. So how do we bring that and layer it at our fingertips? From where AI is today in dentistry, we're seeing it really in these big categories here. And I should say not just AI again, but we're talking about workflow automation, machine learning. So we've got amazing companies out there doing things when it comes to data analytics right now. They're doing things to help support how do we book our patients better, more efficiently, again, give our administrative team the people that they need to call who are overdue, and also processing all the analytics that are sitting in our practice management systems into dashboards and KPIs so we can make more informed decisions around growth within our practice. We've got the practice management softwares that are storing so much of this data, have automated features in terms of how we bill and send to insurance and so on. And then the image diagnostic companies that are doing excellent things when it comes to radiographic analysis, looking at caries, bone loss, pathology on images. And, OraQ, we say, sits in its own little category here, where we're looking at how do we really support patient conversion through patient engagement directly on clinical data. So looking at the clinical exam in a different way, guiding that data collection process and driving to precision care confidently as dentists, and supporting a patient to truly say yes to that treatment. So in my journey, as I was sharing in my introduction, one of the things I did here was I engaged with the University of Alberta Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry, and we conducted an initial research study on applications of machine learning data to patient information to see how does that improve health outcomes. And we looked at a unique aspect of machine learning called topic modeling. So what we were looking at here was when we look at different data that we collect in a patient, how do we see correlations? Again, back to that, Novak Djokovic's coach's example. How do we see differences in the layers and correlations or patterns that we don't otherwise look at otherwise? And something unique came out of it. So when you look at the patterns that a system will give you and you work it backwards, you're like, hey, that actually kind of makes sense. So for example, an easy one here was we looked at, we were looking at predicting and correlating patients for sleep disordered breathing, for example. And we looked at midline deviations would actually correlate with patients that had certain risk patterns associated with sleep disordered breathing. But when we're taught to evaluate a patient for sleep disordered breathing, midline deviation is often not one of the initial data pieces that we look at. So it makes sense after, because if you had a midline deviation, likely you may have had crowding, narrowing of arches that could have caused some constriction of the airway space or tongue space and so on. But these are the types of cool patterns that we start to see when data is analyzed in a different way than what we're traditionally taught as clinicians. A lot of things are happening in the space. The American Dental Association, I was involved in the ADA's working group for AI and standards in dentistry. So a lot of things happening there too, where we're looking at, and we know this is here, we're embracing this type of technology, and how can we ensure that it helps us to think differently and treat our patients differently as well. So again, it all starts with the data collection, right? And if we're not seeing things differently here, how can we see those possibilities? We have to collect the right data, but we know data collection is not the fun part of what we do. We want to get right into the decision. How can I really improve that outcome for my patient? But we have to make sure that we're seeing things a certain way first before we can move into the possibilities. But it's also about finding meaning in every data point, because there's also no purpose in collecting data that we're not going to actually do anything with, because then that becomes useless and a waste of time as well too. So what we're really trying to see here is that taking the right data in, finding meaning in it, but shift our thinking away from just reactivity and filling, as Gary, you said in that, what we thought our jobs were when we graduated, right? But can we change to truly moving away from reactivity to risk reduction and prevention? And how the power in this data can help us uncover these opportunities of care that sometimes we're overlooking because maybe we're not trained in it, or it's not something that we see or thought existed in our patient base. So ultimately, rolls up to this quote from George Lucas. Always remember your focus determines your reality. How can we change our focus, start thinking like that AI dentist today, and start seeing different possibilities in the experience and the care that we can provide for our patients?
Amen. Let's talk about precision health. My first little segment was meant to say that we are busy, and it doesn't matter what else you do in the practice. Even if all you did is dentistry, you're busy, real busy. And finding the focus to pull things together, and maybe you do that routinely, as Amrish said, but having help in that and seeing connections that I might not see because I tend not to have the time I would like to do that is powerful. So let me talk about what I mean by that and why I think anything that creates efficiency of putting information together is going to help, because that's what precision is about. So let's think about this. Precision is always going to be the result of a carefully designed and executed system. And one of the nicest things is when you create a system, you can measure results. So I believe there are 3 steps in the system of doing this. The first one is going to be hearing, seeing, measuring, imaging, and testing everything that patient came with. In other words, we're gathering information. For myself, and I can only speak for myself, I got to tell you that because of my training, while I was doing this, I was already thinking about the dentistry that I would want to do for that. And so one of the first lessons that that I learned later after school was that if I could set aside the need to do the dentistry, this became way more powerful. Let me tell you that it even becomes more powerful if I can have a tool that will take all of this stuff and be able to show me things. Because the purpose of this is not to tell you what to do. That's not what AI does. What AI does is pull all the information together and, as Amrish illustrated, show you connections. And we don't need to go to causation. We can show things that are correlated. And that's why I love that he uses that when he talks about it. Correlation is not necessarily causation, but correlation is the first step toward understanding things. What is happening more? The data determines the needs and the possibilities. Risk gets assessed. A plan is formulated to achieve an optimal outcome, and we're ready to move on to step 2, because step 2 is talking about things. Step 1, honestly, is about uncovering your customer needs. And I use the word customer here on purpose, because when people come to us, they come to us as patients. I know that, but what I've always said is this: I want to eventually have a customer. Here's the difference for me. A client is somebody who wants to help me figure out what it is we should do. A patient is someone who is asking me what I believe they should do. A customer is somebody who now knows what they could do and they want to buy it. And if we can think like that, the first step is about uncovering those needs. So I learned this from Frank Spear a number of years ago. He called this a thing called facially generated treatment planning, and EFSB was the way we looked at things. We looked at the aesthetics and said, what would make these teeth be aesthetically pleasing? That's going to be a position question and a proportion question. Function, how are they working against each other? Structure, do they have structural issues? And then biology was all supporting structure stuff. And the reason I'm showing you this is that became my thought process as I looked at things and evaluated them and began to pull data together. Okay. We added airway things to that in the last decade. So I'm going to say that today that is the flow of things as I begin to pull things together. Okay. Now, one of these things, of these 5, is very different. These 4 conditions do not require a belief by the patient for me to note when changes would be appropriate, just based on health. For instance, Amrisha's example of the correlation between midline shifts and potential airway issues illustrates a fact that nobody asked the patient what they thought about that. We don't go there yet. That's why data is so powerful. The one that I took out, you may notice, is aesthetics, and there's an important reason for that. He's not ugly till he tells me he's ugly. Now, once he says, I hate my smile, I'm happy to jump in and say, yeah, I hate it too. Because now I can talk about things I see. I get it. But I don't want to go tell him that, because aesthetics is the one thing that is determined by the patient, not by the data, because it involves an emotional response to something. When people don't like their aesthetics, that doesn't just involve data. Aesthetics is always a patient-created condition. Okay, now, there are dental reasons why things might be like that, but I learned a long time ago, and obviously I'm speaking here for OraQ, but I bet OraQ is smart enough to know that it might be artificial. I was going to say he or she, but I'll let it speak. I might be artificially intelligent, but telling people they're ugly is probably not a good idea right off the bat. Agreeing with them can work. The beauty of this is you can start to see correlations in things even involving aesthetics that are dental things and begin to tie those together, which is really fun. By the way, all 5 conditions get discussed in this next step. See, here's what happens. After getting all the information, which is the science part, we're going to gather all this stuff. We're going to also listen to the patient. But initially, my aesthetic things are noticing things that are dental that play into that aesthetics. But again, I'm not going to make it an issue unless the patient wants to make it an issue. I have some dental issues that, when corrected, will change the aesthetics big time, because form follows function. But I don't create that as an issue because they may not want to hear about that. The idea is this: OraQ puts everything together and stratifies the risk based on all the data that's collected. You identify clinical conditions that could be different if optimal. Now, that means that the patient is seeking help. Okay? But right now, I got to tell you, it's all about the data. I'm not thinking about the patient at this point. It's why the whole idea of Watson worked. And Watson is being used today in a lot of places. The programming was written so that it just pulled together all of the information about what it was told about someone and just started to correlate things. Now, it's not telling someone what to do. What it's doing is providing some clarity for what is there by looking at it differently. And when you look at it differently, or in ways we never could, because when it's a lot of data, I don't know that I could do that and hold all of that in that vessel. I move between things. Step 1 is bridging the needs of the patient with their optimal treatment plan, which means that they're not involved individually. It's all about the data. Step 2 is going to be a patient understanding that condition. And they're going to ask the question, what can we do? Sometimes they say, what should we do? I love to then say, should is a power word. So I love to say, let's talk about what you could do, because that gives them the option and keeps them in the discussion. Okay. We'll decide together what's the best way. And that's where that all takes place here. And having better data at the start and seeing other possibilities that I might not have seen can change this part of the discussion powerfully. Okay, that patient now wants something to be solved. Now, if he wants to make an aesthetics a problem, says, can we do something to change my smile? That's excellent. Now I'm going to answer his question. By the way, as dentists, we call that case presentation. In my life, what I was told was, though, that I was supposed to do this case presentation before the patient had accepted anything. And I'd love to think differently about that for this reason. The patient has to accept there's something they'd like to have different before a case presentation can really be appropriate. The good news is that in health, a lot of times, some things are very straightforward and we see those. But sometimes we don't build everything in to what we talk about with people because we don't think that's what they're asking. The beauty of getting a picture of everything before you ever even consider talking about it is incredibly powerful, because when I get to this point, The case presentation is what I want to call a case discussion. And the only reason for that is it's really me answering questions that patient has about what could be different and how it might happen. And if I can do anything to make that more efficient, I promise you I'm going to get to step 3. Because more people will be asking me for those solutions to things that they now understand how they're happening and why. And they say, well, that could be different. Let's do some dentistry. Can you do this for me? By the way, I love to label that case acceptance part 2. And for me, case acceptance part 2 has a whole nother statement for it. It's, I want to pay you for this. I discovered that when people found a reason to ask a question, that they had already decided that's something they wanted. And I recognized very early in my career that when people were dealing with something they wanted, almost all of them figured out a way to pay for it because it was worth it. It was now absolutely worth it. I can tell you that precision optimal care strategies and treatment planning, when we can make the gathering of the data and the evaluation of the data more efficient, is going to make us all better. Patient awareness and case acceptance absolutely increase. Because as we talk about what we see rather than about what we can do, all of a sudden, patients wonder, well, wow, that could be different. And for me, that should be different. You get better outcomes. Because when you have a partner in the care, there's this whole thing. When the patient is your partner, has anybody else out there noticed that it usually works? When they're your partner in doing this stuff, you're going to get definitely better outcomes, okay? It's the consistency in data collection and data interpretation that makes all of that stuff possible. And the integration of technology and artificial intelligence into our systems, it's not about how, it's all about what. And to me, that's a very important thing. Somebody said to me once, well, so we're going to be unnecessary. We might as well just get trained to do this stuff. We don't have to think. So no. You actually have to think more. The good news is you don't have to hold all this information in a vessel while you tie it all together and say, well, what does that mean when it's this and this and this? You're going to get some help on saying, you saw, because you gathered the data, you and your team, you saw these things. These things correlate to this kind of thing, whatever that is. In the Amrich's example, it was airway stuff and a midline that was off. It's correlated. It's not about how you would do something. It's about what is there. You still got to say the what. And this is the fun part for me. If you wait to ask the what is necessary, it will require you to ask the why. You have to have asked the why. And I got to tell you, I've been doing this for 45 years. Why is the only reason any person has ever or ever will buy dentistry. It's the why. It's not the what. It's the thing that is the difference, the change, the outcome. Dentistry is the result of it. And if you can change your belief about how you interact around the data with a patient, it will change their ability to answer that question for themselves and let you experience what their reason is. By the way, then you absolutely have a partner. OraQ is the kind of structure that can create precision around those discussions. And that's why for me, I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Gary. And I love what you say about the why, because I mean, that's something that was, core to the journey that I shared before as to, what happened after the flood and putting me on this path and going from one practice to another. And it was this why when I started seeing how all of us, even within my own practices, were looking at patients differently again, right? And, what's the why that I wanted to serve when it came to creating this new future here and this possibilities that we can do with enabling this technology is all about how can we do something? We describe it in OraQ as the mind and wisdom of 1,000 dentists at your fingertips, right? And if that can give another clinician somewhere, anywhere in the world, just that little bit of extra information or insight that's going to allow them to do that one thing better for the patient or draw that correlation, as you mentioned, that will now help them connect the dots for the patient's why, I think we're changing the way that we can do what we do every day, right? And that's what put us on this path of this future that we built here at OraQ, which is about how do we empower patients with giving them full transparency and ownership of their oral health to enable this case acceptance process as well too, and help us as dentists so that when a patient lays back in your chair, now you're going to talk to Q, and Q is going to guide you through an AI-driven precision exam on your patient. Q is going to guide that data collection process and allow you to give you that insight at your fingertips, and like what we call a customized risk and recommendation profile, so that you can actually see, holy, how do I put all these things together, and what are the possibilities that I can see now in this patient, and help give it back to the patient so they can see their why and connect those dots as well too. So this takes us into where we are today with our company is all about an AI workflow automation and technology enabled approach to new patient exams and recall assessments. So when we go into what does that mean? I mean, every time we walk into an opportunity today, whether it be for the first time for our patient or for that 6-month checkup, we're faced with these different discussions. Our hygienists are faced with questions often where they'll say, hey, Dr. So-and-so just walked out the operatory, but I was here 6 months ago and the other doctor didn't talk to me about something like that, right? And so we're getting these inconsistent recommendations sometimes, where they come into a practice for the first time and, love it when we hear that story where patients like, wow, I've never had an exam like this before. Like, this is amazing. But why did they never have an exam like this before? So how do we bring that consistency to that process? Do I watch this tooth? Do I treat it, and how? Like, do I do direct restoration? Am I doing a crown, an onlay? What's the best way to go about it? Well, this patient's got diabetes, and we don't know where their blood sugar lies. Should I really put them on a 3-month, 6-month hygiene, correlating medical data, the medications, other inflammatory risk factors, all to that process? Is it a night guard for this worn occlusion patient, or should I address the occlusion, or should I be looking at sleep apnea? So all these questions we're faced with day in, day out, every day in our practices. So how we're aiming to address this is really about, again, making meaning from that data and leveraging this dynamic risk and recommendation profile so that we actually look at overall prediction, identification, and progression of disease, so that we can now give meaning to that data, help us think about the data in a different way, so that ultimately it enables us to confidently come up with treatment recommendations that are all catered around lowering risk and making patients healthier, right? And that's the ultimate goal here. And if we can now also enable co-discovery with our patients so that they can engage in this process, we want them to see this. We want them to see areas in green, yellow, and red, and actually ask us the question to say, hey, what does that mean, doc, right? And again, back to that why that Gary shared. The second really cool opportunity here is about the oral systemic health connection, right? And how can we take that data between the medical dental integration piece? I just came back last night from Health in Las Vegas, which is one of the largest med tech conferences in North America. And for the first time ever at Health, they actually showcased dental innovation. And OraQ is one of those companies that had the honor to be there. And it was such a cool thing where we're putting oral systemic health on the map to the larger medical community and say, oral health is systemic health. We have to be integrated, and we want to be integrated as dentists. And how do we also open up the two-way communication effectively with our medical colleagues as well, understanding ATP in patients, numbers of medications, ASA classification, all these things, how it all correlates to risk. There's some really cool things happening out there in research around phenotyping of patients and helping understand where do they fall in those pathways, genomics, salivary testing, all these different things. But that just means more data, right? And it means now we have another test that we run, another report. We have to interpret another outcome from a report that we have to piece together with everything else. And that's, again, where the technology comes in. So we can correlate these things and make meaning from it quickly and easily. And lastly, Gary, you talked about this too, is that, how do we bridge the needs and the wants of the patient with an ideal optimal plan? And, you're giving great insight on, like, we need the patient to be ready for that too. And the cool thing about this data that we collect through our system is that we can really understand the needs and the wants of the patient even before they come in the door, and start giving the dental team that information so that we can be prepared and better able to drive a personalized patient experience for that patient, so that now we're also talking to the patients who want to do the dentistry. That's what we want. We want to do amazing things. We love the dentistry that we do in the different cases we want to treat. But if we can capture those patients and know who they are, doesn't it make that conversation and that co-discovery that much more effective and exciting all at the same time? So these are some of the key things that we're really excited about with what we're doing with the data within our technology. So why are we talking about this all today here? Like, why talk about this technology now? And there's some changes in things that we've all seen in our industry, but multi-dentist practices, whether that be at a single location or part of a group or a DSO, is a major emerging trend. And, the problem of inconsistency and productivity discrepancies and everything is multiplying at a fast rate. So we need a system again, and a system that's going to help us do what we do better and consistently again. AI is here. I mean, we're hearing about it everywhere, and it is that number one trend that's anticipated for the next 3 to 5 years. And 88% of dentists actually believe it's going to benefit them in their practice going forward. And it really relates to that last point about we love technology, right? We love our gadgets in our practices, but it's such a key aspect to our belief about our metric to success. So that's why we're really talking about this and why you're hearing about it everywhere in dentistry today. So to the business value now, like what can a solution like this or solutions out there and the data collection, all the different things we're talking about here do to drive value for you and your practice tomorrow? And ultimately it boils right down to, again, patient case acceptance, patient experience to drive practice growth. How do we give patients and enable them to come up with their why? So they're asking the questions so we can do the right dentistry on those that want it. And also diagnostic proficiency and consistency amongst dentists. That's a key element here. We touched on training and everything. We all go to amazing courses and continuing ed out there, but we need to be able to implement that and do it at scale within our practices. So if it's a principal who's been out for 25 years, goes to a great workshop with you, Gary, and he comes back or she comes back Monday morning and says, I got to implement the system in my practice, but the new grad maybe hasn't been there yet. It's a struggle, right? Like, how do you get everybody on the same page again? And, dentists who have multiple dentists within their practice also are working very hard through mentorship and continuing education every day to drive that proficiency so that they know that all of the dentists are looking at the patient in the same way and uncovering all those opportunities of care. And if we had a system or something that can help us do that, I think it's a game changer again. So from that side of things, ultimately it's coming back to accelerating clinician proficiency real time. And we learn things. How do we have a system that creates an accelerated learning curve versus the traditional curve? And I heard a statistic years ago when I started this that less than 11% of what we learn in courses and this and that actually gets implemented. And that's often why we keep learning about a lot of the same things. We go to study clubs, we keep talking about it, going through occlusion, all these comprehensive, complex things, because each time we go, it kind of puts that light bulb back on something maybe we heard of at the last course and then reinforces our learning so we can put it back into implementation. But what if we could really blow that 11% out of the water and make sure that every time we look at every patient, we have a tool that's actually helping us think differently about that patient, nudging us in the right direction, again, that mind and wisdom of 1,000 dentists and giving us what we need to learn to be able to make those insights. So what have we seen from our solution to date? And this is, again, back to business value. What we did is we looked at traditional examinations. We compared them to ORAQ examinations. Our data collection process, like we're a web application that guides a clinical exam process, starting all the way from pre-intake through a preclinical exam where a dental assistant or a hygienist is going to be involved, to guiding the dentist also through what data they need to collect, and then supporting them on creating a treatment plan based on that risk and recommendation profile for that patient. So that's what we tested, and we looked at the data being collected before, looked at the data being collected after, had these offices run through an ORAQ exam, and we saw some amazing things. We saw almost a 2.5 times increase in terms of types of treatment opportunities, of course, translating the dollars that were uncovered from these exams, which works out to almost a $1,400 per day revenue opportunity. And we're not talking that everybody was told they needed a sleep appliance and needed an orthodontic treatment tomorrow. It was basic care. It was largely grounded in basic care, like putting patients on the right hygiene regimens, putting, that one patient again that, we weren't sure, do we watch this tooth? Do we leave that crack? Do we do a full coverage restoration now? And then opening up the doors for far more value to our practices around dealing with other opportunities like OSA, or dealing with TMD patients, or dealing with more detailed periodontal therapy, for example. The other cool thing we saw is we looked at, traditional case acceptance rates. So in these groups, they were in that 30 to 40% case acceptance rates from patients. We followed patients that, got their little patient profile right in their hands after that exam was done. they could look at it on their own patient portal at home and show it to their spouse or partner and see what happened in the next few months after that. Did they book treatment? Did they pay for treatment and book that next appointment? And we saw a close to 70% case acceptance rate there. So that was astonishing. And we were blown away by the value that patients see from having this transparency and being able to trust now in these little areas that they see little wrist dials in green, yellow, and red. So very, very cool in terms of results. And we're talking about the long-term value that this is building for your practice, the lifetime value from a business perspective, and driving ultimate precision care that's going to create a relationship that's going to allow you to really continue to build that value-based care model. Something I just added in here, this article just got published here actually just on Monday this week. And it's a very cool thing talking about the impact of clinical automation on dental practice valuation. So we talk about the nest eggs that we're really trying to grow and what we're trying to build here. And ultimately, we want to grow a thriving practice so that one day when we retire, we have built that nest egg for us. And what they looked at was a multitude of things from literature reviews, data impact analysis. They were looking at ROI from different solutions, all the way from intraoral scanners to different companies that I'd shared on that slide before, and looking at what was the ROI that came out of it. And they also looked at something called a payback period. So if I'm going to invest X amount of dollars a month in a solution today, when do I see the results come out of that so that I know that it actually did drive growth in my practice in the right way? And they were able to quantify the impacts of automation and key performance indicators that were integral to the valuation of a dental practice. So very, very cool. And ultimately roll this up to like how clinical automation is a key metric that is now going to be looked at going forward in studying and looking at dental practice valuations. So something very cool here that I thought again about, growing our businesses. That's something really neat.
Because that's something that we all have to do. So what I'd like to do to end kind of my part is I want to go back to this part of it. Because as I said, the treatment planning part isn't necessarily the treatment we wind up doing with people. Because there's two kinds of treatment planning. The first one is all about data, and it's all about what can be optimal. The second part is taking that and applying it to that person and allowing them to be part of the process that helps them decide what to do. The first step is seeing what is. This is one of my favorite cartoons by one of my favorite cartoonists. This is by Gian Wilson. And he's got the empty thing here. And he said to the kid, "I paint what I see, child." And my statement earlier about, you can only do what you see is really what this is about. What we have to learn to do, what I had to learn to do, is see. And the way that we see things changes always. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do or what field you're involved in. The things you're able to see changes with time. This is a very famous artist, and this is his self-portrait at 15, 25, and 89. You probably guessed who it is. Your view of things in the world changes as you, with intention, make observations over time. And when that happens, what you're able to do is react differently and interact differently. You only see what you know. Technology is going to transform how we see what is. And the reason I can say that's a current statement that will always be constant. It's going to change. When I started, we had these, just like that, on that little piece of film, okay? Technology is always going to expand what we're able to see. We went from that kind of stuff to this kind of stuff. We now have CBCTs in our practices. We can see differently, okay? It's going to change. MRIs. I mean, all of this stuff is showing us things in ways we never could see before. Information technology is going to transform how we can use all of this information, because it's happening right now. I mean, this is becoming and has become all of those little things there that I would have now had to note somehow. I would have to look at all that, observe all of that. Now what's happening is I capture that information, and this is what gets shown to me. Now, that's there because some people, the brains of 1,000 dentists, looked at this and said, this, and this, just like I did on that little x-ray. which is what we had to do. But now there it is. I now have time to utilize this information in a whole different way than I ever did before. Because I just bought myself a whole pile of time if I'm looking at a full mouth series. Because all the things that I need to pay attention to are highlighted. To me, that's what it's about. ORAQ will help you see more from the start by focusing your attention on what you're able to see in that exam. That's where the attention has to be paid rather than what I need to do. I gathered that data. It helps me see the data differently. Now I can focus on what I need to do. And for me personally, as I said, I won't make you be guilty of my own things. I spend way less time thinking about the dentistry when I'm with the patient. It's about the information, because I know that all that information can get pulled together. And so I don't need to make a decision yet. See, for me, that treatment planning initially on the optimal care, that's a straight road. It's not about the patient. It's about the data and it's about me. Okay. Now, the thing that's cool is that if you ask a whole pile of dentists to just gather data, that's where the consistency comes in. If we all are starting to see the same things, I will promise you we will do some things differently. Our final treatment plans may be different when we get to how, because we're trained differently. We have different experiences. You see, here's the science part. It's all that stuff I talked about as phase one. The listening, asking, looking, measuring, testing, a differential diagnostics, a diagnosis of some sort, a visualized outcome, and a plan to accomplish. That's all in the world of science. Now, dentistry is also an art. Okay, that's why that's all the part one stuff. Now, if you include the patient in that, it's incredibly powerful. And that is also the beauty of this. It's part of including the patient. I want the patient to walk out of that thinking, wow, I need something. Because we noticed some things. I think there's something there that could be different. I was taught years ago, dentistry is an art and a science. And I want to differentiate this. For me, treatment planning is science. And it's because I'm answering questions. Case acceptance, which will involve customizing treatment plans to what a patient will or will not do or wants, is the art. And that's why, by the way, the machine is never going to be able to take over, because machines don't do good art. Because art is absolutely individualized. That's why it's important for me I have to know the machine is not telling me what to do. The machine is telling me, here's all this information. Here's what you said could make that tie together. And by you, I mean us, dentists, us. We did this. We got to be able to visualize an outcome in a plan. That's when the art starts. When you visualize an outcome in a plan, that's when the forks start dropping, because it ain't a straight road anymore. What kind of forks? Ortho? I ain't doing that. Implants? Nobody's putting metal in my bones. If you've never had that said to you, you probably haven't recommended an implant to somebody. Surgery of any kind? I mean, you get my point in this. I have to pay for this. All of these forks, this is where the art is. The art is now putting together a plan that meets the goals the patient allows you to accomplish. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to do anything that's negative, but it means that positive treatment to make them healthy is going to have to be shaped by them and you. The beauty is you're going to be able to spend more time doing that. The forks are always coming about case acceptance, which is paying for something, because that's case acceptance too for me, and about how you talk about it. That's when forks show up. This is what we're going to do. I don't want to do that. Time to offer an option. Or time to say, then I can't give you the result you want based on all of the data. And if they've been involved in the data up to this point, they can understand that. See, can I find a way to stay in the question until the questions come from the patient? And my belief is this: if you can make your interactions with the patient about what they brought, so that's initially going to be just the data, it's then going to bring in anything they made a problem. So an aesthetic issue that they created as an issue, that's going to be tied in for now emotional reasons. I got to stay in the question. I don't have an answer yet until questions come from you. Because when you can ask me, I can begin to offer you solutions to the problems you now own. I want that. Why do you want it? Because it's what I'm after. I'm telling you that proceeds to, I'm ready to make the investment in getting that. We all do it every day. That's the process. Unfortunately, our dental model was shaped by medicine. The difference is most people who walk into a physician walk in with a question, they have a problem. They're looking for an answer. 96% of your patients believe they're healthy. They believe they don't need that fancy stuff. They don't see that that's really what they're asking for when they say, I want to have optimum health and I want my teeth to last me for my whole life. Because they don't understand the things they have. The ability to pull data together, to look at it and share with people what you are seeing. In other words, holding all this information in that vessel is unbelievably powerful. It can make every dentist better. It can help every patient ask you for your best stuff. It will positively change case acceptance 1 and 2 in any practice. If you implement it, it will change the amount of dentistry you get asked to do, absolutely without exception.
It's about like how can we look at, we're looking at about talking about seeing and talking about looking at things in a different way, and really also about how do we look at dental practice growth from that data-driven approach. Just like we were talking about, the Oakland A's and Billy Bean and Moneyball, is that we want to move forward, not away, but forward from the traditional approaches of what we're looking at, and help data and an evidence-based data give us the competitive edge over what we're doing in our practice every day. And I think that's the very cool part here. And what we actually capture through our system is we're looking at where are those opportunities of care? What type of risk is sitting within your practice today? Because until all of us will have a story, until we opened up our eyes to something that we learned, we might have not ever been looking at that before. So I know in my journey, for going back to the sleep example, I know how many patients I probably just gave an occlusal appliance or a night guard to over the years that maybe did need further assessment on their airway, but I only know what I know. And if we can get our eyes opened up to that right there, right then, regardless if we've done training in something or not, that's going to open up our eyes also to say, hey, these patients are sitting there in our practice today. Let's go get trained. Or you have another doctor in your practice or another doctor in your group that can now serve these patients' needs better. And if we can roll that up into a system that allows owners, managers, the larger group to be able to come to a data-backed decision around focusing mentorship and education, that's going to allow us ultimately to continue to drive everything that we do in our day-to-day better. So we're super excited about what we're doing with our solution. We are just now coming into market. Just last month, we were published on the front page of Dental Products Report, and last year named as a 2022 AI Game Changer Technology. So lots of exciting things ahead for us. And going back to what is this future, right? And I hope that all of you walked away with something today, whether or not you're looking at these types of technologies, using them in your practice today, but walk away with something that me and Gary shared around how can I think like an AI dentist today. And if you did that, then I hope you're going to look at data differently. You're going to look at correlations in your patients differently. And if you want to understand how this technology can help you do what you do better, please go to ORQ.ai and visit our site, learn more about it, and we'll be more than thrilled to help run you through what is our process around this. But it all captures the essence within a system, but that we're doing today, which is collect the right data, find meaning through that data, look at that patient from a perspective and of an overall profile so that we can drive prevention, reduction of care, and shift our mind away from reactivity, and ultimately find ways to use this technology in your practice to make what you do better every single day. And, you said it, Gary, this is not going to replace us, right? But, what I really believe is these technologies are going to make us into super diagnosticians. And I think if we can do that, we're achieving that diagnostic excellence, empowering patients to improve their overall health and wellness, and ultimately serving the whole system as a whole. And that's going to be cost effective for everyone. It saves money, it grows the practice, and, we're taking a data-driven approach to it. And, through this journey of innovation, one thing I'd like to share is that, any one of you who are here on this webinar today are here because you believe in innovation. You're interested in innovation. You're excited about what's here and what's coming in the future of our profession. but it starts with us building a culture of innovation within our practices. And how do we embrace these ideas? How do we embrace these beliefs? Because this is the future of how we need to work with technologies like this. And building that culture within our practices is what's going to help us and our entire teams be able to embrace this going forward. So yeah, before I wrap up, I'll just go back to you, Gary, there, if you had anything to add.
Well, just that the future is exciting. And one of the most important things I learned in my life is that being the diagnostician, by the way, does mean staying in the question. And I have to tell you that the day that I learned that what I have to sell people is not dentistry, it's actually the information about what could be different. Since that day, I've had more dentistry than I will ever be able to do in the rest of my life, because patients do want to have the best.
Well, with that, thank you all very, very much. We really appreciate taking the time out of your own busy schedules to be here with us this evening and listen to the both of us talk. Thank you so much, Dr. Gary DeWitt, as well. I'm humbled and honored always in learning from you, and to have you also on this with us is absolutely amazing. So thank you very much. And I think, what we're doing here is really please reach out if you have any questions. Visit oraQ.ai. You'll be also in the survey that you'll be receiving after. Yeah,
Will. Actually, one of these. This one, do you use Microsoft's technology for the AI?
Yeah, that's a cool one. So our platform is actually built more on the Google platform than Microsoft's. But when it comes to the AI side of things, we're actually doing that through our own data science team. So we leverage technologies out there that are enabling the ability to now take all our different data points and process through different machine learning algorithms, and then with our own algorithms that we've created ourselves too.
And this one would be aimed at you. What's the average cost of having ORQ in your practice, and what's the time frame for training that you plan on?
Yeah, great question as well. So with how we work is we're a monthly SaaS subscription solution. So we have a cost per month of $595 a month. What we're looking at, back to that ROI and dental practice value, we are confident with the testing that we're going to add over $10,000 of revenue to your practice in a month. So that's the value and the promise that we make. And from a training perspective, it's very quick and easy. I mean, we support you virtually or on site to ensure that we get your teams up to speed on how they want to use this. And it's a web application that ties into your existing practice management software. So we guide you through the process, but we're enabling and enhancing your workflow without changing anything major that you're doing already today.
I think we have time for one more. Do we integrate with Dentrix Ascend?
We do integrate with all the major dental practice management softwares out there, and absolutely. So we're here to enable your existing workflow already.
So thank you all very much. This has been really, really fun.
Thank you very much, and hope you all have a great evening.